Welcome to Model Engineers Laser. My name is Holly and this is part 9 of our jack build. In our last video we had finished fitting, put my teeth back in, the cylinders, and the final stage of fitting that cylinder process. I've got the instructions, I'm going through it. There's quite a lot of lengthy detail, but basically what it wants you to do is extend the rods here, the piston rods, to check that these run parallel to the frames. You'd be surprised at how easily you'd be able to tell if they're out by just looking at them. You don't necessarily have to measure, but if you're not convinced, you can double check and measure them, and this is where the build frame comes in handy, because we can just unlock it and spin it to access on the other side, and these should just slide in and out quite easily. So now we're moving on to the connecting rods. Just going through the instructions, it says remove one of the crosshead screws and cast metal crosshead from the end piston rod to fit the connecting rod. As with the coupling rods, the two lugs at the rear should point upwards. So these are your rods here, and you've got your two lugs on the end pointing upwards towards the rear of the engine. Now, something it doesn't say in the instruction are that the rods that you get are actually handed, and the way you can tell is that they're bent. So can you see that from this round end here, it goes out and then it bends this direction and straight up, and then that bends flat here. So this one with that at the end is going to sit on this side, which is your fireman side. So I'm just going to show you that one again. I'm going to show you how it differs. So they're both the same way up. Can you see they bend differently? They bend away from each other. If I pinch those two ends tight together, they look like a pair of tweezers. And that's how they're going to sit on our engine. So with those at the rear end, you want them to be facing apart. This side is coming on the engine side that we're working on at the moment, and that is going on that far side. And you want to remember to have these lugs pointing up, and you also need your washers to go on there. So double check you have got the right one, that this is bending away from the frame and that the lugs point up, and they're going to go on there like that. I'm going to straighten my frames up and put the same on the other side with my washer. Two lugs pointing upwards, and they're going to pop on the other side there. Just going to hang down just for now. So the next part we're going to fit are our crossheads. Now these are the ones that come in the kit from Roundhouse. I'm going to take them out of the kit so they're not so shiny and you can see them better. There we are. Two little screws there. What isn't clear in any of the instructions is that these aren't the ones that we're actually going to use. We're going to keep the screws, we need those. We're going to discard those. And you actually need, it isn't the spares list that you need them, it's part CLCH, and these are the crossheads that we're going to use. Fitting them is a fairly straightforward process and not too dissimilar to what's in the instruction book, but it is a little bit more complicated and isn't detailed in the magazine or in the booklet, because of course this is a different set of parts and a little bit fiddlier than what we have been doing. So one of the things that we now need to check is that these are actually handed as crossheads go. So let's turn them around so they're both so you can see. Now they are mirror images of each other, so I'm just going to hold the one. How we're going to put this together around is that the end of our connecting rod here needs to sit in this section here. You can see that there's a cutout there for it to sit nicely through there. There's also a little extra groove that cuts out here, and that's going to fit on this. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Sorry if it's made your eyes go a bit funny. So the top cutout is going to sit on this bar here. The rounded end of the connecting rod is going to sit behind this here and on there. And then the screw that we've taken from the other packet is going to go all the way through. The hole in the piston rod is actually threaded, so it will screw into that. So you will need to adjust where the piston rod sits to make sure that that is in the right place. But you'll be able to see that when you turn that over, that groove is on the right side facing where our connecting rod has come from. So we know that's the right one. If we did that on this one, on the other side, if you see, you've got the groove there, and as you turn it round, that won't fit through the cutout there. Your connecting rod won't fit through that cutout, so you know you've got the wrong side. So make sure you've got the right one. The other thing I'm going to point out at this point is the little set of BA spanners that come with Roundhouse. I'm getting more and more frustrated with them because they don't tend to fit. They're either slightly too big or slightly too small. So I've ended up reverting to my own little 6BA set. So how this works, I'm going to make sure I've got it the right way around to start with. And then we're going to make sure that the piston is roughly where I need it to be so that our holes line up. Let's see if I can turn that around a little bit more. There. That better? That's better. So I want to make sure I've checked that this is the right one. I want to make sure that those line up as close as I can to make my fit. And then that needs to sit on all of them. It just snaps in perfectly. And then I'll do it finger tight first. So it should go through a part way because it is the piston rod that's got the thread on. And then I'll put that on. And tighten it up. Now to do the same on the other side. So to keep all that together, our next stage is to fit the return crank. Now there is a helpful diagram on page 11 to help you with the direction of where your crank goes, but what it doesn't tell you is that your cranks are not central. So can you see that this side here has a flat edge? I don't know if I show you from that. That's flat, yet that has a step in it. Now that's because when they're on the crank pins here, when we put these on, they don't run parallel, they stick out away from the frames. So if you have the flat end of the return crank facing the frames, as they go round, they're going to foul on there. So you need to make sure that the flat end is facing outward. Now, good angle for you to see. Yeah, lovely. Now, the next thing to look at, if you can see on the picture here, this is about getting the direction of your crank in the right place in relation to the shape of your crank here. So I'm just going to rotate that around. So this curve at the bottom here, angling up. See, I know it's not exactly round, but that's where it's meant to be. This square section here is the centre of our axle here, and the pin is here. So they're all perfectly in line. We've got our return crank with the flat side facing out, and it needs to be sitting at as close as you can to that angle, really. So I'm going to pop that, before I do, I need to pop a washer on there, and then that needs to go on there. So there's my screwdriver. So as we do this, You see they've put a cross here to help us figure out our angles. I just realised I've knocked the camera, sorry. So we've got a straight angle coming down here, and then that should be an angle at 90 degrees to it through the centre of the axle here. Like I said, it's just as close as you can at this point by eye. It's not a precision job at the moment. And then trying to do it left-handed because of the camera, which is never a good idea. Told you I was a professional video maker, didn't I? I'm just going to tighten that up there. So we're just checking that we're happy with those angles, and then we're going to do the same on the other side. So not in the instructions, but just because I live in a house with a small child and 2 dogs, and I can be particularly clumsy, these I'm terrified I'm going to knock and get in the way and damage them. So they're just the dummy ones, but they are kind of important. So I'm just taking the nut off the back. And pulling that through there, and I'm just, by coincidence, the hole in there is already the same size as what's there, and it's threaded. People are going to scream and go uproar because they're not meant to go there, and it's not right, and it's not right now. So it's just panning it out the way so I don't damage it while I'm doing the rest of the work on the engine. And then I'm going to put, although it's threaded, it just means I'm not going to lose it. Like I've just done by dropping it. There it is. There we go. So that it just keeps it out of the way while I work, and I'm not going to damage it because I'm doing this build in stages. And for the last part of our video, the next section is to fit these on our expansion links. Can you see those? So that's gonna, section all comes out there, but this needs to go through there, and it just needs taking out a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is just drill those out slightly, take the paint off. Oh, cookie clock, there goes the clock. I'm going to take that away and take those holes out ready for these to slot through, and that's when we'll start back on our next video. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on our next video. Please remember to like and subscribe to the page if you haven't done so already, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.